This is Norfolk Coalition of Disabled People's contribution to the big conversation. This is our DVD which charts the experiences of disabled people and how disabled people's lives will be affected by the proposed cuts. What we're not doing is going through each proposal one by one for two reasons. One, because our member agencies will give detailed feedback on that, but also that we oppose the cuts. We don't believe the cuts are either necessary or will be effective. We think they are both discriminatory and disproportionate. And the other part of our contribution to the big conversation is an analysis produced by an independent economist that charts the double discrimination that disabled people are facing by the cuts to welfare benefits and tax changes imposed by central government. On top of that, the proposals by Norfolk County Council to slash spending by a third over the next 3 years, which will devastate disabled people's lives.
When I first found out I was losing my sight, I was completely devastated. I couldn't really see a way forward from it. It just seemed like the end of my life. You know, what was the point if I couldn't see? What was the point in doing anything? What was the point of going anywhere? And I was really struggling to get over those thoughts in my mind. I was then involved with sensory support, who came along to do a bit of rehabilitation work with me, which to start with, they started with long cane training to help me get out and about independently, so I could take my children to school, go shopping. While I was doing my long cane training, I happened to mention that I'd like to do some kind of computing, get into computers, because my children use computers at school, they needed help with their homework. I needed to do things like operate my own bank account, find a way of communicating with friends. I wanted to email, I wanted to do all the things that other people were doing. I wanted to surf the internet, I wanted to do my shopping, I wanted to do all that kind of thing. But I just couldn't see how I would be able to do that. And instead of saying, oh, well, no, you can't do that, you're visually impaired now, you have to accept you can't, she said, well, why aren't you doing it then? Let's get on and do something about it. And having that attitude made me suddenly think, someone thinks I can do this. Someone thinks I can do something. And I thought to myself, well, perhaps that means I can do it. If I hadn't had that support, I would be sitting at home now on my settee, afraid to go out, having other people do things for me. I wouldn't be working. I wouldn't be able to support my children with their school life, their homework. I wouldn't be playing my saxophone, going dancing, having a social life, contributing to society, paying my taxes.
I would probably become homeless. I'd probably go back into crisis, end up being back under section in hospital. My life would fall apart.
So can you tell us about what about those things that support you to live independently? What makes the difference?
Well, it's a combination of all of them together, because I'm on what is called a recovery programme. I've been on it since 1995, working steadily towards recovering from serious mental illness. And if any component of that plan falls to the wayside, then the whole plan collapses.
My name is Chris Edwards. I'm attached as a senior fellow at the University of East Anglia in Norwich, and I've just been doing a report on the impact of the cuts on disabled people in Norfolk. I found some depressing statistics, if you like. The disabled people who are poorer than the average, poorer than non-disabled people, will be hit particularly hard by these cuts.
On the front of the Navigator leaflet, it says that we're there to help you navigate the minefield of civilian life. And that's what it is. It's a minefield. To an ex-soldier, civilian life is a minefield.
The County Council is proposing to make cuts of up to 50% in prevention services. It's making huge cuts to social care in mental health, and it's raising the eligibility criteria from substantial just to critical to exclude people who are currently substantial. Can you tell us what effect that will have on you and your peers?
Well, The effect would be that at one time or another in the future, most of our Navigators members will go into a critical situation where they have to be hospitalised. If you don't prevent this thing happening, if you don't step in and help these people put their lives back together again as soon as you pick them up, then it ends up escalating to a point where it costs thousands of pounds just to keep them incarcerated.
These cuts over the next 4 years will cut the standard of living of disabled people by over a third. It's massive. By something like £2,500 a year, well, in 2014-15, £2,500. In early years, somewhat less, but it comes to something like a third fall in their standard of living.
I'm a disabled parent. I have 2 young children, one aged 6, one aged 2, and I receive direct payments to help look after them. If I didn't get those, if those go, I don't know where I'm going to be. I get 8 hours support every day, every weekday, to help with cooking, cleaning, running after them, the works, and it's just allowed me to be the parent I want to be.
It's disproportionate and discriminatory because the disabled people tend to have lower incomes than non-disabled. There's something like the average income of disabled people in this country is something like 20% below those of non-disabled people. And of course, in a sense, they should be above to compensate for their impairments.
You're making disabled people even more vulnerable than they are already. A lot more people won't be able to leave their homes, won't be able to have social lives, work lives, won't be able to pay back to society, won't be productive in any way.
A lot of people were saying, yeah, but the Norfolk County Council has to cut its budget because central government's cut its budget. Yeah. And the answer is, well, we shouldn't start from here. We should have been adopting an alternative strategy.
I've lived in the community for 15 years.
So would
I'm the first person to have a direct payment.
Right. So would it affect or maybe put that at risk?
Yes, definitely.
Why?
Because having the cuts will affect people with different disabilities living in the community because of their care needs.
Right. And at the moment, your needs are assessed as being substantial.
Yes.
But the County Council are proposing to do away with that category.
They are. The County Council want to do it as critical, and I think that's completely wrong.
Why do you think it's wrong?
Because not all of us are critical at the moment.
Right. So if they took away your direct payment or your personal budget,
they're taking our rights away and our independence.
So if you lost your personal assistant, what would that mean?
That mean I won't be able to have cooked meals. I would have to live on frozen food, pot noodles. You should think of what you're doing because it will affect every person with a disability.
The effect will be disastrous. I mean, these supports such as prevention services, such as the provision and transport for daycare, these are essential services to disabled people in Norfolk, and they're going to be substantially cut.
Over the journey that I've had since I lost my sight, I've used services like sensory support and respite services and children and family services, because I also have disabled children and a disabled husband as well, so I live in quite a complicated family setup. And the cuts, in some respects, would be a really backward step for us because although at the moment we are able to be independent, I can't honestly see that independence being maintained. I mean, sensory support services are so vital to people when they first become registered blind or partially sighted, because that is the way, that's the kind of portal into the services that are provided for blind and partially sighted people. So without that fundamental service, how is somebody who's stuck at home absolutely terrified because they're suddenly unable to see, how are they going to be able to learn how how are they going to work out how to use a white cane? You have to have some mobility training initially to be able to apply for a guide dog. It isn't as if you become blind, so suddenly you have the skills to be able to cope with that disability. It takes a long time. Sensory support have helped me to enable me to do things for myself and to be like any other person. And actually accessing information, I mean, that's a massive, massive issue for people when they lose their sight, is that they're not able to read anymore. So learning how to get those services that can alleviate those problems and actually help you recapture some of your independence is so important. The way our care package is set up it's through me, but it's really for the whole family.
Yeah.
And so they see me as a substantial risk. And a lot of the services that they actually offer me are to maintain us as an independent unit.
Yeah.
Now, if that is cut and we go into crisis because, you know, things could go wrong, or, you know, life is exhausting, it's actually very tiring.
Yeah.
And apart from the fact that I've got a sight problem, it also means that there tends to be a risk of people becoming depressed and having all sorts of mental health issues. If that all comes apart and I'm having to contact them every time I have a crisis, that's going to cost them a lot more money. For the last, 5 years or so, we've been banging on about inclusion and people being part of their communities. What is the big society if we can't be part of it? Because we're not going to be part of it. We're going to be stuck at home, living in squalor.
If you are truly representing the interests of the people of Norfolk, that you will tell the coalition government that it's not possible to make these cuts in the interests of the people and the citizens of Norfolk. And if you do make these cuts that you propose, we say that you will reap the consequences. Not only will it be more expensive, but it will be damaging to disabled people's lives. That, as we said before, it's discriminatory and disproportionate, and you will have to take the consequences, both politically and economically.